Welcome to Move 6. I am Bucky Brooks. My guy DJ is off in Detroit getting ready for the draft. So today, stepping into his place, Jason Moore joining us, co-host of the Fantasy Footballers podcast. He got a draft special coming up. I'll make sure I promote that, get you guys to check that out. But Jason, how you doing? What's going on?
I'm doing well. I'm stepping in for DJ now. These are some pretty big shoes to fill.
Yeah, but you can handle it. You can knock it out. You guys do an outstanding job on your podcast. We talk about everything scouting related. You guys talk about fantasy football. So before we even jump into what it is that you got, I got to figure out, like, how did you jump into the fantasy football space? Like, what is the origin? How did you guys get started?
Yeah, the origin is a long time ago now. This will be our 10th season doing this full time. We used to work together kind of in video game development. I used to run a video game company, and the other two guys there worked for me. And all we cared about was fantasy football. We're like so many people in the world where it was like, we're doing this job. We're doing this work. It was a great job. But man, the only thing I cared about was football, was the NFL. And all we're doing at every lunch is talking about football and annoying the programmers and the artists and the people that aren't in our league. And so, you fast forward a couple of years and we just decided, you know what, let's take our knowledge of how we run this business and put it towards a passion. And so we got into the podcasting space, the fantasy football space just at the right time. And, I guess we had kind of a secret sauce of camaraderie and friendship and positivity that just seemed to work well. And we've helped people win fantasy championships along the way. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of how we got started.
Okay, I like that. So I have to ask you this because as a fantasy footballer myself, the most leagues that you've participated in at one time.
We try to limit ourselves. I think I got up to like 12 or 13 leagues where it was like, I'm trying to really participate in all of them. And I'm not counting, the hundreds of best ball leagues that you don't have to, do anything with. Now I try to stick to like 6 is my cap, but really, if we're being honest, there's like 3 I care about. And then I'll do like 3 others that are, if I win, I super care about that league, most important league, but otherwise it's my main 3.
Okay. So now tell me this, because you've been doing it a long time. How has fantasy football changed since you guys jumped in, not only as players, but since you started doing the podcast? How has fantasy football changed on your end?
Yeah, I think the biggest change has been the adoption from you guys, from the NFL itself. A long time ago, fantasy was seemingly antithetical to, even though it brought so many eyeballs to football, it was kind of like this, it was the unspoken, well, we don't like the fantasy football aspect. And now, as time has moved from that over the last decade, we realize, like, man, everybody loves fantasy football. It makes watching football more fun. It makes the Thursday night game that doesn't have your hometown team in it super exciting. I'm invested in all of it. And everyone knows someone who's playing fantasy. So the community aspect, that's a big part of our show. Like the community, I wouldn't talk to some of the guys from my college from, way too long ago now, unless it was for fantasy football. So the NFL has really adopted it. Obviously, full on investment into fantasy. It's a really nice ecosystem that one feeds the other. It just makes the experience better.
Yeah, no, so it's so funny. So going back to my experience playing fantasy, I mean, I guess, man, it's so crazy that it's over 20 years now. But I remember working as a scout for the Carolina Panthers and just having such a vested interest in fantasy. And it changes the way that you watch games, right? So now you pull for different things. It's almost like when you work on the media side, you start pulling for storylines as opposed to pulling for your team. Like, I mean, this is my team, but if this happened, it certainly would be okay to talk about. Fantasy football also brings up that stuff. And there's nothing like team being blown out and then you get like the garbage touchdown at the end or the garbage yards that all count and change. So fantasy for me has definitely given me a greater interest in the game, particularly games that you normally would never pay attention to. The Thursday night game between 2 bad teams that no one cares about. You may have a player. It might be your quarterback. So it's been a lot of fun to kind of watch fantasy football grow and to really watch the NFL embrace it, which brings us to you guys. So you have a great podcast, Fantasy Footballers podcast. Like, talk about it. Like, what is it that you guys cover on your podcast, and why should the guys from Move the Sticks, why should they tune in?
Oh, well, we cover everything fantasy football related. We're talking, this time of year is rookies. We're talking free agents. We look at every position, and I guess the reason, I think you guys should tune in is simply because I believe, and I don't want to toot my horn too much here, but we have a nice balance of
It's okay.
Yeah, all right. Sometimes it's hard to find a really good show that knows what they're talking about that is also entertaining. You know what I mean? Like you can watch a fun show and lose your league, or you can get really good information and fall asleep. We try to marry the two. Fantasy football is more fun. Like we all do this for entertainment. Our main league, like our league of record that spawned this whole fantasy empire that we have, there's not $1 on the line. This is all bragging rights. This is all false sense of security. We feel so good about our knowledge, flexing, and talking trash to your other league mates. So we try to make the show have that kind of vibe, but also give out so much good information so that, when you're around the water cooler, you could talk about things you had no idea, that you could easily know 300 plus players and be able to name them all and their stats. It's crazy how, the knowledge comes by osmosis when you participate in a show like that.
Okay, so you know what? You're going to be the go-to show, because I know all these leagues where the person who finished in last has to do the silly gag gift, or they got to go on a date with a giraffe, or they got to get a silly tattoo that's there forever. So we're going to make sure that, particularly if I ever participate in one of those leagues, you guys are my source of reference when it comes to all things fantasy football. So what we're going to do is we're going to toss to a break, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about this year's draft. And I need a little bit of your expertise when it comes to how to make good decisions when it comes to fantasy football. So right after the break, we'll be back. All right, Jason. So we're back, and now like this is when you get an opportunity to help the football scout, like help me become a better fantasy football player. So first things first, I got to figure out, how do you guys come up with like your overall fantasy rankings for rookies? Is there a system? Do you look at metrics? How do you guys decide how to slot in the rookies when it comes to the ranking system?
Yeah, there's kind of two seasons, right? In a week, we will start statting out every single player in the entire NFL. That is a laborious task that is not fun, but is very worth it. It really kind of lets the rankings fall where they actually should be when you see realistically how much each team is going to score, how many yards, and then you divvy it up. Right now, though, the scouting time, we try to take a holistic approach. There's film bros and there's analytic bros, and they sometimes want to fight. And we're like, what are you doing? Take it all in. We try to watch film on all the combine prospects at the skill positions, watch 8 to 10 games. We do that, the three of us on our show. We do it independently so that we don't I'm always waiting until someone's got like, oh, have you looked at this guy yet? No. Okay. I'm not going to say anything. But then we also, we look at production profiles. Those are really, really important for successful fantasy outcomes in the future. And we look at historical research. There's a lot to learn from, especially not even in the good stuff, not like, oh, these certain things always win, but there's sometimes some red flags on historical research where it's like, if a guy doesn't hit this threshold, it doesn't usually work out. And those have kind of helped avoid some landmines in the past. So we just try to take it all in and make our rankings holistically.
Okay, so now taking a holistic approach, is there a player in this year's draft that is getting a lot of hype in the first round? Like people are just buzzing on, can't wait to see what he's going to do so they can grab him in fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the big three wide receivers. This year, there's no Bijan, there's no great running back. Obviously, Caleb Williams is great, but in fantasy football, it's usually running backs and wide receivers that are going to really win you your league, generally speaking. So you've got obviously Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, and Roma Dunze. Those three guys, I think, will succeed. They have almost no red flags, no yellow flags in their profile. They should have the draft capital. Those are the guys that are worth it. You're going to invest in them. They should be good as rookies. You see a lot of rookie success at the wide receiver position, especially lately over the last 5 years in the NFL. So I would start right there at the top.
Look, those pass catchers are terrific. And, like the decision that teams have to make when it comes to, is it Marvin Harrison Jr., is it Roma Dunze, or Malik Neighbors? Which one is first? It'll be interesting to see how that breaks down. But from a fantasy standpoint, you can't go wrong taking any of those guys. Now, you alluded to the fact that, it's not really a quarterback game. It's not a quarterback driven game, but we got some rookie quarterbacks. Talk about 3, maybe 4 could go into top 10. So when you guys look at first round quarterbacks from the draft, like, who do you have slotted as like your best guy from a fantasy standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, you've got kind of 2 real options, and then I think there's a huge drop off. So Caleb Williams comes in the best situation any number 1 pick overall has ever been in. I mean, I can't imagine that there's someone that is going to the number 1 pick, which is usually the worst team, that all of a sudden has DJ Moore and Keenan Allen and Cole Kmet and a decent defense. So they're built for that. When you inherit that 101 capital, you also get grace. You get time. So if you're in a dynasty league or something and Caleb Williams comes out and isn't that great, no worries, none whatsoever. He will be given all the grace in the world. You saw that with Trevor a couple of years ago. Trevor Lawrence comes out and, throws 12 touchdowns and 17 interceptions his rookie year. Who cares? He was the number 1 pick, the greatest prospect since Andrew Luck. So he's got that baked in. But from fantasy, I mean, you need rushing quarterbacks. I say it all the time on my show. I speak into the abyss. I think fantasy scoring is broken for quarterbacks. It takes 10 rushing yards to make a point, or it takes 25 passing yards to make a point. So if you got really mobile quarterbacks, they are the ones that win you leagues. They're a cheat code. They break fantasy. And so Jaden Daniels is certainly the guy that, rookie year, I'm curious, once we stat everybody out for our draft kit, I would not be surprised at all if Jaden Daniels is above Caleb Williams in my expected fantasy points.
Wow, I hear you on that though, because it's the hidden yardage, it's the rushing yards. You talk about 1 point every 10 yards. Rushing stats matter. You talk about being able to get 50 yards, 5 points. That makes a difference. I've seen it happen. I remember the Michael Vick experience and how much he added to it. I know how crazy Lamar Jackson was when he finally stepped onto the field, particularly Lamar Jackson his rookie season. Yeah, Jaden Daniels certainly has an opportunity to make it happen. Okay, so let's do this. So we're bringing some real football. So if you are the Washington Commanders, do we go Jaden Daniels? Do we go Drake May? Are we going Jaden Daniels because we feel like he is the one to kind of help us? Like, if you're a fantasy footballer, who would you want the Commanders to take?
Yeah, I think they will, and I think I would want, both as a fantasy football fan and if I was a Washington Commanders fan, I would personally say Jaden Daniels is the right pick. It's almost scary, the parallels to me between RG3 back in the day and Jaden Daniels here, where you've got the Washington team at the number 2 pick with a true dual threat option. And unfortunately, RG3, obviously, career got derailed with injuries, but he came out on fire. He looked like a superstar his rookie year, he was going to take over the NFL. Jaden Daniels has the ability to really, really, really elevate a franchise because it's not just running and it's not just passing. In today's NFL, if you're going to be a pocket passer, you better be outstanding. If you can do both and do both well, it gives you a baseline that's really good. And then, from a fantasy perspective, I just talked about how that scoring is broken. Since 1990, rookie quarterbacks that crossed 80 total rushing attempts on the season, they all 100% of them are top 10 fantasy quarterbacks in points per game on their rookie season. Wow. So that's a number you would expect him to cross wherever he goes.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is like you want the rookie quarterbacks to have weapons on the outside, but if the offensive line is a little leaky and they have to scramble a little bit, that's okay.
That's okay. Run. Go. We want that. Go. That's I think
that is okay.
One of the problems I think with the football fan not yet accepting the fantasy football fan sometimes is that disconnect. It's the disconnect where it's like, well, yeah, this works for fantasy, but not for the NFL. And I get that. That's why I don't like mobile quarter. You look at Justin Fields. Justin Fields was not, the NFL determined so far this offseason that he was not worthy of the starting job outright. But for fantasy, he was great. It's like, I don't care. He might have lost games, but take off and run and win me a game. So there is that disconnect there. So, yeah, I'm not worried about the leaky offensive line if you got wheels.
Yeah, so it's funny you talk about his ability to be able to run, and for so long, fantasy football had been dominated by not only pass catchers but running backs. We're now seeing in this class we may not have a clear choice as number one. Who are some of the guys that catch your interest as fantasy darlings potentially as rookie running backs?
Well, it's going to be whoever the Cowboys take on day 2. That's, when it comes to running backs, the landing spot and the draft capital matter almost as much as the talent. Let's be honest. It matters more than the talent. And so really I love Trey Benson. He is my number one running back. I think that whenever you see someone that is over 215 pounds and runs sub 4.4, that trait translates in the NFL. There's very, very few guys that have done that. The only guys that do that in the top 50 picks of the NFL draft are Ronnie Brown, Edgerrin James, AP, Ryan Matthews, Deuce McAllister, and Matt Forte. So it's rare, but it always works. So like if the Cowboys take him, he'll be a monster. But if they go Jonathan Brooks, great. Tony Pollard left so much there. And you don't even realize, like, he was given 16 carries inside the 5. You don't realize it because he only had 3 rushing touchdowns from those. But you put a new rookie in that system with all the opportunities with day 2 draft capital, that's who will be the best rookie in fantasy is whoever the Cowboys take, if they take someone at 56 for sure. And then they've got another day 2 pick.
Yeah, look, the Cowboys definitely the running back. That running back is going to have to be the bell cow. He not only has to be the bell cow in a situation where they're desperate for the back, but they have a quarterback who is motivated to make sure that this offense is going. And in the last year of the deal, the running back in Dallas would play a huge role in their success. Coming out, like, it's so funny because I don't know how it's been impacted in the fantasy world, but the last few times that we've seen a tight end selected early hasn't really worked out the way that we thought it would work out. We think about even going back to TJ Hawkinson, Kyle Pitts, it hasn't worked out. So now we have another one. Brock Bowers coming out of Georgia, big time playmaker, can do it all from a fantasy standpoint. How do we think Brock Bowers is going to impact the team?
Yeah, I stand a little bit more alone within even the fantasy community. I am very anti getting up in arms for rookie tight ends. It doesn't work. And I know people say, "Oh, look at Sam Laporta. He just did it." And yeah, it's like, okay, yes, he did, but he wasn't the guy. Dalton Kincaid was the guy. Sam Laporta did it. In fact, if we talk about like looking at historical evidence and knowing for fantasy purposes, we're not looking for decent players, right? We're looking for superstars. We're looking for the guys that score all the points and win you your league. And if you look at the handful, the very few tight ends in fantasy football who have been difference makers, Gronk, Jimmy Graham, Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Mark Andrews, none of them were drafted first. Most of them were drafted 5th, 6th, 7th in their draft class. The first guys drafted, the Kyle Pitts, the OJ Howards, the Eric Ebrons, those guys have so much. I mean, I'm not saying they're not talented, but it doesn't always work. And really, this isn't just a fantasy thing. This is an NFL thing. You've got a lot of first round or top 50 picks at the tight end position in the NFL. And, David Njoku was the only first round tight end since 2015 who actually signed a multi-year contract with the team that drafted him. Like it has not been working out for tight ends drafted early, both from the NFL and for fantasy. So for me, I love the talent. I think Brock Bowers is super talented. I'm out on him as a rookie in fantasy, unless he goes to the Chargers, which is actually in my mock. I had the Chargers traded back and drafted him. Then he's got that Mark Andrews role in the new Baltimore West, Los Angeles Chargers. So I think that would work.
Yeah, I do think it would work. Okay, so you kind of matched him with the chart. Is there another player or prospect that if you could put a perfect fit where from a fantasy standpoint, if this player goes to this team, it's going to be fantasy gold?
Yeah, for me, I look at, obviously you want a great quarterback. There's no better quarterback than Mahomes. They could always use another wide receiver, but he has changed the way him and Andy Reid have changed the way they've had to play. They've got a better defense, but they've also, now they get so much zone that they have adapted how they throw the ball. So I'm looking for zone beaters. For me, that's Ladd McConkey and Troy Franklin. Specifically, if we're just talking to Jason Moore, I love Troy Franklin. I think that guy, if he goes to the right team, he will absolutely produce. He is one of only 4 players that was over 3 yards per route run against both man and zone. He can destroy against zone. Patrick Mahomes could find him. Andy Reid could use him. So if you're just saying perfect of perfect, it would be Troy Franklin to the Chiefs. That's my that would get me hot and bothered.
That. I love that matchup, and given the little situation that with Rice, where we may not see him on the field right away, it could be a great opportunity for Franklin to get on the field. Now, I know that you're deeply in tune on draft. You know the first round outside of the first round consideration that you think may be a nice little fantasy gem.
Yeah, outside the first round, the players that I think could be a fantasy gem are usually going to be running backs selected on day 2, kind of like we talked about. I like Trey Benson, Jonathan Brooks, whoever goes there. Blake Corum, there's a chance that he could end up, going to the Chargers. Marshawn Lloyd, I think he is very talented. He's got the speed, the pass catching ability. So I'm looking at day 2 running backs. If I'm worried about after the first round, who I think could be really good. And I'll throw Xavier Legette out there as well. Weirdest profile I've ever seen in my life. I tried to research and find anyone else with a year 5 breakout. Does not exist. He's one of one. And I don't understand how it could have happened, but this last year's tape, man, he was so brutally good. And I don't know if that's just because now he's a man playing with boys in the 5th year, or if, everything I saw was just legit. So if he goes a little later, I'm probably going to be in there too.
Oh, look, he is a weapon. Last thing for you, though. Last thing, because I am one of these guys that participates in these Dynasty League. Give me a rookie that I need to kind of lasso right now that's going to help me win my Dynasty Leagues.
Your Dynasty Leagues, obviously, you're going to be talking about the top guys, the Marvin Harrisons, Jaden Daniels, all of those. If you're wanting someone a little bit later that you think can play for a long time, I'm going to go Ricky Pearsall. I think he's got the best hands in the draft. His hands are great. His athleticism is off the charts. And so I like people that, it's like if you can run good routes and you can catch everything thrown your way, that just works. That's like a quarterback's best friend. And so I don't know that he'll necessarily be the superstar you need in fantasy, right? Like I call it the Tyler Boyd barometer, where Tyler Boyd is great. I loved Tyler Boyd coming out of college. I think I argued with Matt Harmon, who I believe was working for the NFL at the time. He wasn't a big fan. I was like, dude, this guy's tape is great. But he's not a fantasy. He's not winning you championships. He's great. He's played 8 years in the NFL. He is phenomenal. He'll get a new contract this offseason. I love him, but he's not winning you championships in fantasy. And so I do worry if Ricky Pearsall will be a dominator, but I think he'll have a great career, long-term career in the NFL.
Yeah, it kind of strikes me as one of those flex guys that you kind of have. You have 2 studs, then you're looking for that guy that can just kind of some days give you like a little pop. Ricky Pearsall has that. Like, it's funny because I think Ricky Pearsall, Ladd McConkey, I think they're cut from the same cloth in terms of player, and both guys have been mentioned on the podcast. So, look, all my guys, all my people, the community, we got to make sure we check out the Fantasy Footballers Draft Special. It will air exclusively on NFL Plus on Thursday, April 25th, following the conclusion of the first round of the draft. You got to make sure you listen to my guy, Jason Moore, and the crew to get all your fantasy knowledge. Jason, man, this was great. I feel like I'm ready, man. I feel like I'm going to have to go back and maybe add another league to participate in because I got a little more information and knowledge.
All right. We'll see you in a league whenever you want. The invite is open, and I can't wait for the draft this weekend. Thanks for everything you guys do.
Hey, man, thanks so much for coming on, Jason. It's been great. Once again, man, I want to thank Jason Moore for coming on, co-host of the Fantasy Footballers podcast. It was great having him on. Make sure you guys continue to listen to Move the Sticks. We got all your stuff broken down this week after the draft. So after the draft, me, Brett Lewis, we're going to break down what took place after round 1, after rounds 2 and 3. So make sure you come back, have it locked on Move the Sticks. I'll talk to you next time.